Hey everyone, and welcome to the Weekly Wrangle. I'm hoping that you're having a great Monday thus far, a good start to the week, or whenever you're watching this. And today we are going to react to the Super Mario Brothers Galaxy official movie trailer and really break down some of the VFX. We're going to sketch over some renders and just talk about what we're seeing. It's going to be a great time. We are also live, so feel free to add in comments, say hi in the chat, and just hang out for a little bit as we dive into some of the details here. Okay, well, let's dive right into it then, shall we? I'm going to share my screen. And the first thing I want to do is just preview this trailer all the way through and enjoy it for a moment.
You're here!
Now, where's the troubled pipe?
Come on, you're not the scared guy anymore. Yes, I am! People don't change!
There's the problem. Hey. It's all right.
Who is this?
Yoshi.
Come on.
So some dinosaur just shows up and he's now part of the group. Cool.
All right. A lot of really cool VFX in this one. I saw that and I was excited just to see all the different effects that were going on here. So one by one, let's break down some of these VFX and, just kind of pretend like you have to make all of these things in Houdini or all these different effects in Houdini. So I'm going to turn off the volume as we do this, and we'll start here with the dust scene. And we're going to just sketch over this. Sketching over renders is something that I talk about in Houdini for the New Artist 2 all the time, because it really just helps you brainstorm how to really go about everything. It gives you a game plan. It gives you something to think about when you jump into Houdini and you have that blank screen in front of you or that blank node tree. And so anyway, let's talk about the dust here for a moment. And actually, I'll just go forward a little bit so we can, there we go. We can see it right there. The dust is pyro. I mean, what you do is you just shade this for dust instead of steam, and you send a velocity going that way, and then you have your source animate from the interaction between the ground and the motorbikes here. So that source animates from here. One thing that is always good to know is that oftentimes you can just take particles. You can start with the particle simulation. You can just send it in a direction, rasterize that as volumes, and then it just pushes the smoke in that direction. You don't really need temperature. If anything, you probably need gravity, putting it back down onto the ground. And then there you go. That's pretty much the effect right there. So that's how you'd go about something like this. And also, just to mention, you'd probably throw in a little bit of disturbance here. oftentimes what I'll do is I'll also have velocity go ahead of the plume itself. So you source a additional velocity that's time shifted ahead of the plume itself a little bit. And then that will help break up some of the mushroom shapes, or it'll help just, in general, give us this sort of rounder profile that we see right there. And then there you go. That's pretty much that. Now let's take a look at this shot here. What about shading? Let's say that you had to shade this sort of thing. What could you do to shade all of this amazing fine detail that we have here? We have the dust that's along here. We have a reflection that is kind of green tinted, makes sense for glass. We have an overall dust over the whole thing. We have all this nice leather detail that's really specific to leather in the middle, right? We have all of these little breakups in the bump with the highlight of that metal that makes it look like it's kind of chipped away. And in general, we have some interaction here as well with these studs. It kind of gets darker as it makes contact with the metal that's underneath that. So a lot of different things going on here. My first thought is not doing really UVs. It's doing a combination of masks and triplanar projections and noises. The nice thing about noises is that we can essentially get infinite levels of detail at practically no cost. The nice thing about triplanar projections is that we're able to get specific patterns in areas like this. And it also makes it easier to adjust the resolution if need be. If you ever get close up to something and you just need something, a little bit more detailed, but specific to a certain shape. So that makes sense for that right there. We keep going. And we have this cool reveal. Now there's two main effects in here that you might encounter as a Houdini artist. We have the water fountain back here, right? We just need some water that's pouring into something. We don't actually see contact of where that water is. So you really just need some kind of pyro shape that's going down and just making something look like water. You can just mesh smoke if you really wanted to, because again, we don't see that interaction. We have this cloth right here, which is essentially just a vellum simulation that's blowing in the wind. And that's pretty much it for that shot. And same deal here, we have that. We also just have in general some hair simulation going on with the mustache and eyebrows and all that. Nothing too crazy there. A little bit of wind on the hair. That was cool. And then we have this really cool looking pyro effect where you grab some fire and then it goes through this reveal here. Just like that. Now for this one, let's actually break down what we see right here. So the fire itself has, let's go back just a tad bit here again. Fireball itself, let's take a look. Okay, he actually doesn't show a fireball yet. This fire spread is really just an attribute that spreads across the character. So imagine we just had this general wave of values that starts like here, right? You can just have a general wave, like a mask of point attribute values that are 1. And then you can break up that attribute with an attribute noise, or an attribute noise that multiplies against this main wave. So the idea is that you would have two signals, one signal that's the main location of this, and another one that pokes holes into all of this as well. So let me see something here. YouTube is saying that your stream may temporarily be blocked. Can you guys hear me here in the chat right now? Just because I'm showing some copyrighted Mario content here. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, I don't know why it's saying that, but let me know in the chat if you can still see all of this. I want to be able to react to this stuff and, talk about it, but we'll see if YouTube lets me do that or not. Anyway, continuing on, but again, let me know in the chat if you can still hear and see all of this. I just want to make sure that we're good here. All good with the stream. Okay. Just making sure it's not blocked or anything. It was just giving me a warning here to the side. Anyway, as I was saying, we have this main wave here. We can break that up with some noise, add some detail with that, and then you just spread it across the whole character. Once you have that signal on the points, you can then use that to create volumes based on those attribute values, and then that becomes your sourcing for pyro. So that's what happens here. The dissolve effect as well, so changing or making something invisible, changing the shader on something, because remember, it's not just dissolving the cloth here, he's also changing the shader in, what's underneath there. So he now has a completely different shader. He might just be actually dissolving the geometry itself. But either way, what you can do for that is you can actually shrink the polygons. That's one way of doing it, or you can just do so in the shader. So you can just take that mask and then turn the geometry on top of that invisible to reveal what's underneath that. There we go. We got a little fireball. And notice how with this fireball, we're pretty much clipping to white. This isn't a pure white though. It does have a little bit of color. So my guess is that they are very intentional. Illumination Studios is very intentional about how they tone map this pyro. It's not just one blob of color. It does have just a tiny bit of detail in there, and we're not at an absolute pure white. So they're definitely color managing that quite well. And that's pretty much that effect right there. Going on, fast moving pyro. All you have to do is just take that fireball, make it stand still, set the wind, set the velocity in whatever direction you need that to be, and then you can actually just transform every single fireball that Luigi's throwing back there and, have a bit of motion blur going on, and you can avoid stepping. Because normally when you have fast moving pyro, you'll see multiple fireballs when he throws it. But if you just make it stand still, you push the wind, get some motion blur, and transform it, that actually will give you that effect right there. Going forward here, we have all these rocks. They're about to push that over. So with this rock, there's a couple of ideas I have in mind for this. There is some RBD happening here, but that RBD might just be for some of the secondary elements. I'm not sure specifically how they did this, but you could just animate this boulder here by setting a pivot down here to where it's pivoting, and then you can just rotate it from up here so that the big rock goes down. Perhaps that's hand animated, but then everything else, all the secondary rocks are allowed to collide with the animated objects, and then that's where RBD might happen. Or another option is they just hand animate this big rock. It goes down, and then at a certain point, it activates into RBD. So let's say that the rock is, halfway down here, and then perhaps at this point, the actual RBD kicks in. What you would do is you would just take your active attributes, right? And you would set that to 1. That basically turns this on, and now the RBD solver is taking over, and the fall and the interaction looks much more natural after that point right there. So something like that could be great. We have little dust plumes. That's pretty easy. You just have your collision objects, a couple of sources with pyro. You just kind of poof it up a little bit, right? And then we go forward here. You'll notice that we have this little explosion when Yoshi jots out. So that's kind of a combination of dust. You can just have an object moving really fast out of the pipe. And again, you can just shoot the velocity in the opposite direction of the character. And that will give you dust that's heading towards the pipe, right? So just imagine Yoshi just bailed out of there, right? Really fast. But we just take that object, take the velocity in the opposite direction. We shoot dust going that way. We have all these tiny little debris. Notice how we have big, medium, and small scales. That's always a quality, or that's always a sign of quality in RBD, is making sure that you have those different scales in there. So we see that some of this might be particles that are coming out, right? Like your really tiny things might be particles with tiny rocks instanced to them. Some of this might actually just be larger chunks of RBD. And then he bails out of there. We have some sparks. There's literally a Houdini node that can give you sparks. He's like lighting that right there. And also another thing that might make this a little bit easier when you're trying to get the main body of the fire. So there's really two parts here, actually, to this. You have the sparks as one layer. So we'll just say, here are the sparks. That's one layer. This is just particles, essentially. And then we have the main body of the flame. Now, with the main body of the flame, you might think to add in some volumes and to just, source in volumes that are flickering. Another way you might be able to do this for the main body is just to have a noise that masks a flame's visibility. So if you just have fire that's always right here, but some of it's invisible, and you just animate a mask on that using a volume wrangle or something, that can give you actually better control, so you don't have to resimulate as to the timing of the main fire body right here. So if we go like that, all of a sudden the main plume is visible. That could have been there the whole time. You just reveal it by multiplying against the flame field and some kind of, mask in SOPs. So he goes down there. We have that. Really great lighting here, by the way. Notice how the light's going to turn and reveal Yoshi just ever so slightly. We have light reaching into dark. There's multiple layers. All of those artistic principles are at play here, big time. There we go. This is a gorgeous looking environment right here. Really cool. We have the ground opening up. This is just taking some areas along the ground, making attributes where those areas meet. And then when these things spread apart, when these ground planes spread apart, you can use those areas of interaction to introduce glow in the shader, as well as spit out some particles and pyro. So going back a little bit here, if we look at the ground that's about to open up, happens quickly, but all of that sort of stuff is just finding an attribute where those two things meet. You can use a mask by geometry to create a occlusion attribute to do that if you'd like. And then, just layering in a few effects elements from there. This sort of thing is pretty cool. We have this flip that's going up here. And this flip, one thing I like about it, well, there's a few things I like about it. Number one, the lighting is great. The lighting is awesome in this one spot here. We have areas of dark, we have areas of brightness, we have highlights being shown in a complex way. As far as like how to make something like this, a lot of this comes down to retiming. So like you can have a simulation happen and then you just make it go fast and then slow. I'm guessing that's probably what happened here. And all you need to do is just have a flip tank. You can even have some rasterized particles. So let's say you had a particle blast that has the shape you want in particles first. You rasterize that into velocity volumes. And then because flip is this hybrid volume particle solver, you can just source in those velocity volumes and push things in that direction. That's one way of doing it. You could try taking metaballs and just adding a general force, although metaballs is better for more of like a boiling sort of thing. So this is most likely just using particles, getting your velocity, and then sticking that into a flip sim. And then as we go forward here a little bit, we can see in the back all of this nice meshing that's happening. And we have some nice kind of foamy areas. Those foamy areas could be a whitewater solver, but more likely it's probably just a layer of particles that are set along the edges of this whole thing. So what you could do is you could take the original sim of particles, you can revamp that, shade it as this sort of diffuse white sort of foam color, make it really small, And then that gives you a few different layers to the shading of your water. So as an example, we have these areas. Let me do something besides white here. We have these areas that could be the diffuse white, and then we have this nicely thin meshed flip sim here, which I'm guessing is probably coming from volumes. So if you have this sort of thin sheet right there, most likely all that detail isn't using just your standard kind of meshing technique. It could be, but more likely it's just going straight from the solver using volumes and meshing from there. And then as we go forward here, look at that. We have vellum. It's bouncing off of the umbrella, right? And then we have some cool cloud shading. And then one last main scene down here with the T-Rex, some particles coming out of his mouth, some spit right there. And then on the ground here, we have a combination of instancing, some noises, and the main base dirt texture. And in the back here, you can kind of see these plants here are kind of flying in the wind, which is a really cool and somewhat difficult thing to do efficiently. And there you have it. That's pretty much the effects breakdown of what you have here. But one thing you'll notice is that when I'm analyzing this, whenever a professional VFX artist is analyzing this, you're thinking in terms of the fundamental forces that underline all of simulation. I'm not looking at this and saying, where can I find a tutorial on T-Rex spit droplets? Where's my step-by-step on how to create spit on a T-Rex, right? Or where's my step-by-step on how to create this fire cloak transformation? All of this comes down to a deeper understanding of solvers, of the ingredients that go into those solvers, and how to use them in such a way where it gives you an end result. And that's one of the big lessons I want to convey in this video, is that when you're looking at VFX, when you're analyzing it, what's going to get you to a professional level is being able to look at stuff and then translate that to the core building blocks of solvers and Houdini that equals whatever that thing is. So another thing that I want to point out here is that when we take a look at all of this stuff, it's pretty much everything that I've taught so far at CG Forge, all bundled in and slightly changed a little bit here and there into one trailer. The dust right here, as an example, is pretty much what I talk about in Pyro 1. Now you see steam right here and you think, how is this related to that dust plume? But all you do is you change the shader from a steam shader to a dirt shader. And instead of using temperature, you would just figure out how to set velocity horizontally, right? Using some particles. Then you combine that with this cool little quick tip, this distance from geometry that Christian did, where you just take the proximity of one geometry to another for sourcing volumes. And check this out. If we can get our quality up all the way. Hold on, there we go. Yeah, you just get your sourcing based on this one node. There we go, like the quality was glitching out. See that? Same exact idea. Take a little bit from Pyro 1, take a little bit from this quick tip, boom, you have that effect right there. Going forward, we have the cloth and water fountain simulation. That's exactly, or actually we have the eyeglass close-up, which is right here. All of those techniques talked about with triplaners in shading technique 1. We talk about how to make those ambient occlusion masks, all without UVs, and oftentimes at a better resolution than just, hand painting everything. Shading technique 3 goes into using noises and how to create that really, really fine detail that you probably see along the edges here of the metal without totally breaking your scene with, 16K texture maps and whatnot. When we take a look at the cloth simulation that I was talking about, Look at this chapter right here from Vellum 1. We talk about cloth and vellum and how to set that using the distance along triangles constraints. When we talk about the fountain in the back, we want a really quick way of just creating some water where we don't see it interacting with the bottom of something. Boom, we have this. This will actually save you a ton of time versus trying to set up a flip sim when you just have a background element that just needs a little bit of water right there. Same sort of thing. When we talk about hair and fur, you can set it up right there. You can simulate it. That's what we see on the hair, on the mustache, same kind of deal. When we talk about the pyro, that's exactly what we cover in Pyro 2. Now, it's not this exact situation, right? But you can translate what you know about shredding and what you know about sourcing and whatnot, make that work for this particular scene, and then combine that with knowledge of how to reveal things using shaders and geometry and Houdini for the New Artist 2. Look at all these reveal effects that we cover in this course. So there's a reveal effect. There's another reveal effect with Tweaky right here. You can take this same exact logic, apply it to what we just saw here with that, combine it with Pyro 2, and you have the same thing. When we take a look at the RBD, guess what? It's the same thing, right? Or fast-moving pyro, right? When Luigi is throwing those fireballs really fast. Same deal here. You just take the object, you freeze it, simulate it, and you animate the object again. When you take a look at the RBD, destruction, how to set the active attributes, how to understand the attributes and control them dynamically within a sim. That's one of the very first things we talk about in Destruction 1. That's covered right there. The ground, tearing apart. That's what we did here. And you can just modify that tutorial to give yourself masks for fire, for a few other things, for some particles flying out, and you would have what you need for that. When it comes to the flip simulation on the fountain, we go right here. We talk about meshing and shading and how to go past what you typically see when people are shading water, which is often very kind of goopy and thick looking. It doesn't look very detailed. It doesn't have layers. We talk about how to shade for foam and whitewater right here and do so in a way that doesn't have to rely on heavy, expensive simulations like the whitewater solver. We talk about all of that here in the bubbles and foam section. And we just talk about collisions in general and how to source in velocity with that course. And last but not least, take a look at this top-down shot. Take a look at what we just were talking about in Houdini for the New Artist 2. A combination of instancing, procedural shading. We even have a top-down view that's really similar. And that pretty much translates to what we see right here. Obviously, this is higher quality, but for getting you started and getting you the general idea, the general technique, that's covered here in Houdini for the New Artist 2. So the reason why I'm bringing up all of this is because oftentimes what I've found in selling courses and tutorials is that many people just automatically go straight towards the thing that looks the coolest and the thing that gets them the most excited. But that often ignores more so the fundamental base skills that underlie all of these things. Making things look cool is obviously great, but just for a moment, put yourself in my shoes. If you're someone who cares about creating the base skills and really just giving people the ability to think in terms of these building blocks that I was just talking about, it's a challenge because you have to, let's say, create a beginner course that looks as cool as possible, but also, more importantly, making it all about beginner techniques that are appropriate for that person's skill level, and it still has to look amazing. And it also needs to be applicable to specific production challenges that you see in real life. The combination of all of those things taught into one place is honestly one of the things that makes CG Forge very unique. Because nowhere else are you going to find this combination of practicality, of cool looking stuff, and of really just trying to teach you how to get this base knowledge on a fundamental level versus just showing you a copycat scenario. A lot of people, they see an effect, they say, what notes can I put down to copycat so I can get a reel and get a job? And that's about as far as they think about it. But really, if you want to be professional, if you want to just adapt to any situation, you need to think in terms of the fundamentals more so than the direct results every single time. And that's essentially one of the main messages I have in this video here, is that you really just got to think about that fundamental education, because that's what's going to actually help you succeed and adapt to real life production scenarios just like this. Again, it's a frustration of mine sometimes where I want to make things look as amazing and cool as possible, but I can't, because I'm more focused on providing specific challenges that are both relevant and appropriate for someone who is a beginner or an intermediate level student, which is most people, honestly. The advanced stuff is great. It's awesome. Me just going totally unhinged on projects is cool, but it also encourages a copycat mentality from more so intermediate beginner users that honestly is the opposite direction of what they need to be going into. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that kind of explains the scenario in a cool way. But yeah, I just thought more than anything else, this Super Mario trailer was awesome. I thought it was a really cool example of all of these different effects coming together and just really practical. Like, if you are going to be a junior effects artist, regular effects artist, senior, whatever, this is a very good look at the kinds of stuff that you need to be figuring out. And the way that you would take a look at something like this and just break down what's happening. You don't break things down by just asking yourself, what tutorial can I find on this? You break it down by saying, how can I use the pyrosolver here? How can I use RBD here? How can I animate that and trigger this attribute over there? Again, that's the level you need to be at to really start swimming here successfully in production. And that's what we're trying to get you to at CG Forge. And that's really what makes all the difference in the long run. So that is pretty much what I have here for today. Let me take a look at the chat here. Very cool. I could play frame by frame on YouTube and whatnot. Okay, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's pretty much that for today. Thanks for watching. And yeah, if you have any other cool VFX breakdowns you'd like me to take a look at, just let me know. Feel free to shoot some stuff over at the CG Forge Discord. There is a new inspiration section where I'm looking at videos that you guys find inspiring, and I'm happy to do these effects breakdowns that are kind of fun to just get an overall idea of how these things actually work. Besides that, I'm still working on procedural modeling right now, and that's going to be really cool because actually, let me share my screen again. When we take a look at these buildings back here, this is totally a procedural modeling situation right here, where we have these basic cube buildings. We have different variants going back. We have it placed along this section. And this is actually a perfect use case scenario for procedural modeling to just populate something like this in an environment. So that's what's being worked on right now with Modeling 2, and just creating a course for how to make those specific effects happen. And yeah, besides that, I hope you all have a great week. Thanks again for watching, and I will